So a reporter on One America News Network calls for executions of people involved in stealing the election from Donald Trump. Is this fascism in America? Let's talk about it in today's video. I'm Mike Greiner. I'm a lifelong Democratic activist, and I'm concerned about the direction our country is taking. If you share my concerns, maybe you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, and maybe even click that little bell that will notify you when I post a new video. So my wife told me that OAN News had broadcast a rant by one of its reporters calling for executions of liberals and progressives because of their involvement in stealing the election from Donald Trump. Let's watch a clip of that video here for a sec.
How many people were involved in these efforts to undermine the election? Hundreds? Thousands? Tens of thousands? How many people does it take to carry out a coup against the presidency? And when all the dust settles from the audit in Arizona and the potential audits in Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Nevada, and Wisconsin, what happens to all these people who were responsible for overthrowing the election? What are the consequences for traitors who meddled with our sacred democratic process and tried to steal power by taking away the voices of the American people? What happens to them? Well, in the past, America had a very good solution for dealing with such traitors: execution.
Now, just to be clear, because this messed me up as well, OAN Network is not Oprah's network. That's OWN. So I was a little concerned when I heard that Oprah was broadcasting something like this, but she is not. This is something entirely different. This is part of the right-wing news environment that has developed, where basically right-wingers are able to spew their conspiracy theories and share them with each other without any fear of reality intruding. And fundamentally, this idea of the election being stolen from Donald Trump is a complete lie, as has been shown repeatedly, including by a study of Republicans here in Michigan. And I'll put a link to a video regarding that study down below. My wife and daughter were initially concerned about the impact this could have on me, because they do worry about me, I guess. But to me, the broader concern is that this is everything that the Nazi Party engaged in as it led up to its takeover of Germany in the 1930s. Now, for years, I've been called hysterical because I've been predicting that the Republican Party was moving towards authoritarianism and fascism and Nazism. I was told that Donald Trump couldn't do the kind of damage that Hitler did to Germany, when in the last election, I argued that Trump was an example of Nazis here in America. Even when rallies were held with Trump supporters doing the Nazi salute, people discounted my fears. But the truth is that this descent into fascism is just another step along a route that the Republican Party has been taking for a while now. I'm sad to say that actually the original authoritarian party here in the United States was the Democratic Party. Historically speaking, the Democratic Party was the party that essentially enforced Jim Crow in the South and fought against Reconstruction in the wake of the Civil War. That all changed, though, in the 1960s, when in the early 1960s, President Lyndon Johnson pushed through legislation that would ultimately become the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Johnson, for his part, understood what he was doing. He said that he feared that his actions would lead to the Democrats losing the South going into the future. Now, I even remember the days back when I was in college when parts of the South were still considered parts of the solid South for the Democrats. And I remember a friend in college asking me, why is the South so pro-democratic? And I had to point out to her that the Republican Party was the party of emancipation. And so this movement was based on race. That is no longer the case, however. And in 1968, President Nixon seized on the reaction of white people against the Civil Rights Acts of the Johnson era and used that to propel himself into the presidency. This was the basis of Nixon's so-called Southern strategy, which has become the building block for subsequent Republican efforts. Now, when Jimmy Carter was first elected president in 1976, he rode into office on a wave of outrage after the Watergate scandal. And in that election, the very religious Jimmy Carter actually won the evangelical religious vote. That would be the last time, though, that Democrats would win that vote. Because starting with Ronald Reagan began the intense effort to woo the Christian right over to the Republican Party. And that's why Ronald Reagan, frankly, is revered by the Republicans. Similarly, Donald Trump brought a new level of unapologetic racism and misogyny to his rhetoric. And his unwillingness to bend to the social norms that require us to respect other people is something that has won the respect and admiration of Republicans. Now, much as Democrats in the 1800s appealed to white fears over Reconstruction in the South to gain power and essentially impose an authoritarian racist regime throughout much of the United States, so too is the Republican Party trying to do that across the United States now. So this continued descent into authoritarianism is really not a surprise. It's really just a duplication of the historic past and building upon what has already been happening within the Republican Party. I think it's apt to compare the invasion of the Capitol on January 6th with the beer hall putsch in Germany in the 1930s. That was an abortive attempt to use a coup to install the Nazis in party, just as January 6th was an abortive coup to install Trump in power. And just as the Nazis only continued to get more and more aggressive and more violent in trying to push their agenda, I think we can expect to see the same thing from Republicans. And this video that we saw today is proof of that. Now, while Republicans will claim that the First Amendment protects this kind of speech, we have to remember that there are limitations on speech, even in the United States. For example, there's always that well-worn cliche about you can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. At a certain point, the interests of society supersede the interests of the individual. And I think that we're getting to that point with some of this rhetoric going on OAN. This rhetoric is clearly meant to incite violence, and we can see that it actually works. I mean, what happened back in the pizza parlor in Washington other than a crazy person who believed in the lies and rhetoric being spread by the radical Republicans being something that would lead to violence? I think it's naive for us to believe that this call for violence and executions is not the type of thing that will be picked up upon by at least some radical Republicans. As a result, we're probably getting to the point now that some of these efforts to incite violence need to be taken seriously and prosecuted. Because if such calls to violence are not addressed quickly, we're going to see the kind of increase in violence that happened in Germany in the 1930s. I'm very afraid of what's happening to our democracy. And if you're not, I'm afraid you're not paying attention. So let's spread the word on this and urge our elected officials to pursue charges and investigations against those spreading this kind of invitations to violence. If we don't, then our descent into true Nazism is probably a foregone conclusion. So if you agree with me or disagree with me, I'd love to hear your comments below. And if you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, that would be a big help. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, let's hope for continued progress. Thank you.